My name's Justin the Clue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today we're talking about Frank Tashlin.
That's right. And for this episode, we are not saying Chaplin-esque. We are saying Tashlin-esque.
And what does that entail? Colorful, probably in CinemaScope, rapid-fire gags, perhaps even a little bit of social deconstructive satire?
So Frank Tashlin is a name that is really only known by hardened cinephiles, but to hardened cinephiles, he represents an entire ethos, an entire style, an entire worldview.
He is a director that was very much taken by the French critics that were popping up around the New Wave as kind of a symbol for the auteur, especially when it came to something as disreputable as a comedy.
That's right. In the 1950s and 1960s, those same French critics who venerated directors like Alfred Hitchcock, Orson Welles, Howard Hawks, you've probably heard of those people, but you may not have heard of Frank Tashlin because they venerated him, and he is a cult figure kind of within a cult.
And what's interesting about him is he doesn't really have any breakout in this modern age comedy. Like, no one's like, yes, The Girl Can't Help It. Every mom and dad knows that movie.
Although it's coming to the Criterion Collection this week,
which feels very late. You would think that would be one that they would have grabbed early on, but I'm glad, better late than never.
But there are a number of reasons why he's one of the lesser known of those French auteur guys. One is because his career was spent mostly directing comedies that were defined by the star comedians.
Yes, everybody loves Danny Kaye.
Well, Danny Kaye, but he's most known, probably still best known, for having been the director who taught Jerry Lewis everything he knew.
And some would say that a lot of Jerry Lewis's style was kind of transmutated through what he learned through Frank Tashlin.
Yeah, we'll get to that, I'm sure. We said we wouldn't talk about any Jerry Lewis movies on this podcast.
We're going to have to, but we didn't watch any for this podcast.
That's right. So yeah, he directed the two best Martin and Lewis movies, Artists and Models and Hollywood or Bust. He also directed a number of Jerry's solo movies like The Disorderly Orderly. And
who can forget Geisha Boy?
The Geisha Boy, that's right. And Cinderfella.
Who's minding the store?
And then beyond that, I mean, it's a tricky filmography to navigate because Tashlin was not recognized by the studios who employed him as a great artist.
No, he was a journeyman. He was like, we can get Tashlin to come in and do this comedy vehicle, like we mentioned, for this star.
Yeah, and the stars that he worked with, in addition to Jerry Lewis, it was Jane Mansfield, it was Bob Hope, it was people who were lowbrow, I guess it's fair to say, certainly populist, certainly commercial.
And if you're wondering, wait, Frank Tashlin, haven't they done an episode on him before? Well, that would be because we talked about him when we discussed the Looney Tunes, because Frank Tashlin, he wasn't one of the top Looney Tunes directors, having directed only 2 Bugs Bunny shorts, one of them being the last short he made for Warner Brothers. He was mostly a auxiliary player kind of guy and also a Porky Pig guy.
That's right. He did the Swooner Crooner, among other classic cartoons.
And usually when people talk about Frank Tashlin as a director of animation, they discuss how he brought a kind of cinematic style that he would use low angles or camera moves to accentuate a gag.
And then when he started directing live action comedies, he would bring a lot of cartoon style to them. He would do outrageous gags. You know, no gag was too ridiculous. So having said all that, having said all the reasons why his filmography is tricky to navigate, here is what Jean-Luc Godard in 1957 wrote about Hollywood or Bust. He wrote, according to Georges Sadoul, I guess that's another film critic.
Yeah.
Frank Tashlin is a second-rank director because he has never done a remake of You Can't Take It With You or The Awful Truth. According to me, my colleague errs in mistaking a closed door for an open one. In 15 years' time, people will realize that The Girl Can't Help It served then, that is today, as a fountain of youth from which the cinema now, that is the future, has drawn fresh inspiration. And then the essay ends with Godard writing, to sum up, Frank Tashlin has not renovated the Hollywood comedy. He has done better. There is not a difference in degree between Hollywood or Bust and It Happened One Night, between The Girl Can't Help It and Designed for Living, but a difference in kind. Tashlin, in other words, has not renewed but created, and henceforth, when you talk about comedy, don't say it's Chaplin-esque. Say loud and clear, it's Tashlin-esque.
Which people have been doing since this review came out, right, Will?
I love this about Jean-Luc Godard's film criticism criticism. Every 6 months I pull Godard off the shelf, and I'm like, I'm gonna love this book this time. And with Godard, it's like a guy throwing a lot of stuff on the wall, and like there are individual ideas that are great and eternal and continue to, Justin's doing the motion of a stopped clock that's right twice a day. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. All those guys, especially Godard, it's like they had individual lines that are eternal, and then a lot of other stuff.
Godard really hedges his bets by giving the opposite of things, like within the same sentence. I think Godard is one of the only books where it is packed with footnotes, and some of the footnotes is the editor going, I have no idea what he's talking about. But you know what? He's right there in the sense that The Girl Can't Help It is held today as one of the great comedies of its time. And when you think of the other studio directors making comedies when Tashlin was doing it, it's like Norman Turog, who did the other Jerry Lewis movies.
Or George Marshall. No, I mean, Frank Tashlin is wonderful partly because he still carries this air of disrepute. There still seems something just a little bit lowbrow and a little bit unreclaimable about him. And that is the core to his genius, because he is, you mentioned earlier, a social satirist. He's somebody who not merely satirized the vulgarity of American culture in the 1950s, but he celebrated it.
And I was very happy to see that he was a guy that kind of stumbled into animation, became very popular because he could do it very quickly, and was fired or left almost every job that he had because he got in fights with his bosses. That he could not stay at any place, to the point that like animators would say stuff like, here today, gone tomorrow, now you see him, now you don't. That was Frank Tashlin, who would be working at Leon Schlesinger's one day and suddenly gone the next day. And I think you get that feeling in his movies, and that he was someone that was very individualistic, even though that he worked in this studio system. He did a bunch of kids books, including a famous one called The Bear Who Wasn't in 1946. Are you familiar with that one?
I am not, no.
The story is about a bear who wakes up one day after hibernating to discover that he is in a city. He finds himself in a factory where the boss goes, hey, you should be on the factory floor. And the bear says, no, I'm a bear. I'm not supposed to work. And the boss says, all right, I'm going to take you to my manager, and we're going to tell you that you're supposed to be a worker. And the book is a series of like escalating gags where they get to the bigger and bigger and bigger boss, until the bear is hammered so much that he should be a worker, and that he should just, shave and wear a coat, that he goes, hey, I guess I'm a worker. And then he works until winter comes, where he gets fired, has to leave the factory, and goes, oh boy, I wish I was a bear. And then he realizes, oh, I am a bear. But because society has been trying to push into me for so long that I'm not, and I should be something else, it takes a lot of time for me to realize the middle ground of where I'd be happy. And that's kind of like where Frank Tashlin was working within the studio system.
Yeah, and you can see a little bit of that same ethos in a movie like Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, and its vision of a man working within a system.
Yeah, I mean, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, watching it this time, I found it less acidic than I remember it being, that it's fairly kind of tame in the story of, I mean, it's funny that a lot of Frank Tashlin's like bigger films all star kind of like wrinkly older leading men, especially when you put them up against like Jane Mansfield.
Well, yeah, they're kind of wimpy guys, and she's this, just
fabulous bombshell. Yeah, Will's trying to find a polite way to say it.
It's like, imagine the cartoon version of Marilyn Monroe. Anyway, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? Let's talk about this one, because not his first movie, not his last movie, but this is probably the one that is the classic. This is the one more than any other.
More than The Girl Can't Help, even though that both of them are seemingly the same, to the point that at the beginning of Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, I believe the star goes, oh yeah, we're going to be watching The Girl Can't Help. No, we already did that one. We're doing a different one this time.
So I liked that reference to The Girl Can't Help It, because it implied that Tashlin was thinking of himself as an auteur. He was thinking of it as like the Frank Tashlin cinematic universe. Anyway, so this one stars Tony Randall as Rockwell P. Hunter. He's a low-level writer at an advertising agency, dreams of climbing the corporate ladder, dreams of the big office at the corner of the hall. And he has an opportunity to do this because he has a plan when the advertising agency is about to lose its biggest client, which is a brand of lipstick. He has a scheme to rope in the biggest female star in the world to promote the lipstick. played by Jane Mansfield, the most buxom, the most absurdly beautiful movie star to ever live.
Very funny in this movie, playing a parody of the blonde bombshell who is aware of what her position is. And everything in this movie is all kind of machinations. Like what you're seeing on the screen has been engineered by the people to be that way in order to probably just get you to buy product.
So she agrees to endorse the product. However, Rock Hunter, the Tony Randall character, has to pretend to be her lover so that she can make her real lover, who's like a Tarzan type movie star or TV star, I mean.
Bobo.
Yeah, be jealous.
Or Bozo, one of those ones.
Yeah. And Tony Randall then becomes a superstar overnight.
Lover boy.
A Kevin Federline type figure.
Will success spoil Kevin Federline? The remake that should have happened.
So he finds out that fame is a bit of a double-edged sword. And, you know, it is a gentler satire than perhaps one remembers it.
I mean, his boss at one point goes, you know what I'm really scared of? Being an imposter because I'm just a junior, when nobody in those positions that are managing companies ever think that.
So it's certainly a movie that looks askance at the corporate power structure of capitalist striving and all that.
And when Rock Hunter gets to the top, he realizes that this is not what he wants. All he wants is to work on a chicken farm.
But, you know, it's a movie that's also full of media satire, television in particular. The opening credits play to a bunch of commercial parodies. Halfway through, Tony Randall interrupts the movie. You know, he comes out of a curtain and he says, we don't want to leave our friends, the TV fans, out. So we're going to have a section of the movie that's for them. And then the movie becomes a little black and white square.
Yeah, he's sticking it to those TV people.
But I love that. And that's kind of like this freewheeling approach to the cinematic form, where when we're talking about what Jerry Lewis took from him, Jerry Lewis took that from him. He took that there are no rules. No gag is too big. No facial expression is too big. No woman is too buxom. No man is too ridiculous. What Jerry Lewis didn't take from him was the social satire. Jerry Lewis's movies are much more like...
It's about me, Jerry Lewis.
Yeah, it's an insane man in his insane head and his multiple personalities.
And also, Jerry Lewis wants the audience to like him, whether he is wild or they feel bad for him, and something like The Nutty Professor, where he like lays on the sentimentality. And in these, you know, top tier Tashlin films, the sentimentality is very minor in them.
So we also watched Son of Paleface, which is one of his earlier features. I think it was his second feature.
Yeah, he had written the first, the Paleface, the Bob Hope vehicle. And I think he probably got the job because, you know, he had written for Bob Hope a lot. He wrote for Groucho Marx, who actually shows up at the end of Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter. And it is closer, Son of Paleface, to what you would expect from someone who directed so many Looney Tunes shorts, because it is almost Hell's a Poppin' level in its gag delivery system.
Yeah, I really enjoy Son of Paleface, and by the way, I'll just say the disclaimer that the movie is full of racism, as you would expect a Western comedy of its time to be. Jokes about, like, killing indigenous people, so that's just a little fair warning if you're going to watch it.
At least the people who conquered the West, like Bob Hope, is a fool who does not know what he's doing and is terrible.
Yes.
But then you also have Roy Rogers.
Well, yeah, it's got Roy Rogers, the great singing cowboy star of his era.
But the real star,
horse,
Trigger.
Trigger, the smartest horse in movies.
I love Trigger in this movie. He's great. There's a scene where Bob Hope is in bed and he keeps pulling the blankets down and Trigger keeps pulling them back up. That goes on for like a minute.
Now that is the smartest horse in pictures. By the way, there are multiple jokes in the movie about Roy Rogers wanting to fuck Trigger.
It's great. Frank Tashlin knew exactly what he was doing.
And Jane Russell is in it too, the leading lady. They have, you know, a lot of good moments together. They have some good musical numbers.
This film almost made me want to check out more Bob Hope comedies, because I loved his like sniveling, pathetic hero character who always has a zinger, but is also always the butt of the jokes. And I don't know, I haven't seen his road pictures with Badman Bing Crosby, but
yeah, I haven't seen them either. I mean, what I've seen of Bob Hope over the years, I haven't really liked very much, but I did like him in this, and it goes to show there's a difference if somebody actually funny is writing the jokes.
There's a lot of physical gags too. There's one that I really wanted to create as a gif of Bob Hope being smashed through like 7 walls at one point. Okay. That's comedy.
Well, I mean, my favorite gag is when he drinks from that big drink and then, you know, his head starts spinning around and the smoke comes out of his ears.
There's like 10 gags. The H on his chest goes whoop and like spins up.
This is the Tashlin touch, you know. This is all that kooky Looney Tunes stuff that he brought to live action film. It has a bit of like proto Kung Fu Hustle energy.
Oh, absolutely. Especially a climax, I feels like it's out of Fury Road, where like a wheel goes off the car, but they keep it up and they have to catch the wheel and bring it back.
Yeah, very fun.
But that's something that I feel kind of Tashlin took away from his films as he made them, trying to kind of more narrow in on specific gags, using the widescreen CinemaScope frame in ways that were not as dynamic as they were in Son of Paleface, because as he continued to make movies, he probably felt he had to prove less.
Well, The Girl Can't Help It from 1956, which came out the year before Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, is probably his most, I'd say, visually dazzling movie, at least of the ones I've seen. It, just a retina blasting experience of just like bright blue curtains and ruby red dresses and swooning lighting.
And it starts right off the bat with a format breaking thing where our host comes out and goes, "Welcome, you will enjoy this film in beautiful color and CinemaScope." And then he like realizes, oh wait, we're black and white, we're in a box. So he pulls a classic Xavier Dolan in Mommy and pushes out the size until they're in widescreen, snaps his finger, everything turns to dazzling CinemaScope color.
So you can imagine how this movie was probably commissioned. Like, this movie is a showcase for this exciting new form from the time called rock and roll. Rock
the
and
girl
roll.
can't help it. The girl can't help it. And I love that the theme of the movie is like, look at this loser, this Elvis lookalike. He can't sing or dance, but people love it, so anyone can. I'm like, that's a lesson you got from Elvis?
Actually, I did like that because the rest of the movie has actual black musicians in it.
It's almost Tashlin going like, look at this pale imitation.
Yeah, but then you get to see Little Richard. You get to see the Platters. You see Fats Domino, all these people. Yeah, you can imagine this movie being commissioned as basically like an Elvis movie, you know? It's a showcase for the songs that these kids like. The plot's fun, though, too. It's about a mobster who wants his girlfriend to be a music star. The girlfriend, of course, is played by Jane Mansfield. And when she walks down the street, people's glasses break.
Yeah, love it.
There's a milkman who's holding a little jug of milk and
the
it
milk
boils.
Yep. Could that be perhaps a allusion to some other milky white liquid that does something?
I can't imagine what you're thinking
How
of.
dare you? The Hays Code will come right down on us.
John Waters is a fan of this movie, and from these scenes, they inspired those scenes in Pink Flamingos and Female Trouble where Divine is walking down the street and everyone's looking at her.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyway, she doesn't want to be a star. She wants to just be a homemaker.
She just wants to marry a man. I think he's 49 years old and she's 23 in this movie.
Yeah, so
and he looks 75.
The leading man, Tom Ewell. I had never seen this movie until this week, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I'd seen the other ones, but not this one. And I was kind of amazed when the movie started. It's like, oh yeah, this is our leading man?
It's not even a Danny Kaye. It's
Yeah.
Tom Ewell. Okay,
Yeah.
Sure.
Anyway, there's a love story. I mean, what more do you want?
Well, maybe not this love story, but maybe you can take it as a satire of some kind, if you will.
Yeah, you could.
I mean, in the one that he made after this that we talked about, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, it's actually about someone in a relationship not being broken apart and just staying together at the end, which almost seems commentary on this one.
Now, this was kind of the peak era for him.
He made a lot of movies after this, though.
He did make a lot of movies. There's also Artisan Models, the Martin and Lewis movie from 54 or 55, thereabouts, sort of in the same era, which is, I think, commonly, almost universally regarded as the best Martin and Lewis movie. It has a lot of that Frank Tashlin color and energy. There's this wonderful dance scene in that movie where Martin and Lewis are singing and dancing about color, and they're like splattering the scenery with paint. It's a very dazzling section of the movie, so I recommend that one as well. In the 60s, I think Tashlin gets sort of overtaken by Jerry Lewis a little bit. Like, he's so focused on the Jerry Lewis movies that he doesn't really... I mean, I love some of those movies, but he doesn't really continue his development as a distinctive auteur.
It's a Peter Bogdanovich article where he visits a set of a Tashlin Lewis joint, and Tashlin is essentially shown as a babysitter of Lewis that has to keep him in check to get even the simplest scene done. Like, Jerry Lewis is hiding under tables. He's biting people.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. And then as the 60s go on, Tashlin's basically done by 1970. As the 60s go on, the movies get less and less. I mean, there was another Bob Hope one from later in that era, The Private Navy of Sergeant O'Farrell.
Me, Bob Hope!
Yeah.
Oh, man, we should do an episode on old Bob Hope.
I would love to. Yeah, let's watch
Get
some
Dana
of those.
Gould on, tell a story of being on the Bob Hope comedy special. Yeah, that'd be great.
But Frank Tashlin, he's a man of the 50s, ultimately. That's how you think about him. There was some energy in the air in the 1950s, this explosion of television and advertising. He was this sort of, I'd say his appeal is that he was this sort of like proto Andy Warhol figure almost, which sounds a little ridiculous to say, but it's like Andy Warhol, how in his canvases he has this purposely ambivalent relationship with mass culture and with kitsch culture, where it's like, does he love it? Is it satire? Does it matter? Like, maybe it's both things at once.
And Tashlin is interesting as a director because you can find some books that were written about him, but he is not held up very high as a comedy director that much, to the point that the film he directed after Son of Paleface has seemingly disappeared, called Marry Me Again. It stars Robert Cummings. It has 0 reviews on Letterboxd. It seems to have been released on DVD somewhere, but I don't believe it because I could not find a copy of it anywhere, which is almost unbelievable for a film that came out in 1953.
Well, challenge accepted. One last thing I'll say about Frank Tashlin. I remember in Andrew Sarris's book, The American Cinema, the book where he wrote little capsule blurbs about all the important directors of the studio era. He said of Frank Tashlin, he was sort of ambivalent about Tashlin. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, the issue with Tashlin is that to satirize vulgarity is sometimes indistinguishable from vulgarity itself. And I think in Tashlin's best movies, the response to that would be, so what?
Yeah, like, it's fun.
Yeah,
like, come on, like,
yes, it's a satire of vulgarity, and it's vulgarity, and he finds the beauty in the poetry and vulgarity, and that's wonderful.
On that note, I think people should check out more Frank Tashlin, which I feel they will now that it's got the Criterion stamp of approval.
That's right.
And The Girl Can't Help It was difficult to find for a long, long time. I remember when I saw it at the Royal, they were like, it's not even really available on DVD anymore, but finally that's changing. So I look forward to the other, 30 Bear Manor Media and McFarlane books on Frank Tashlin coming our way.
Let's get Say One for Me starring Bing Crosby in a deluxe special edition release.
I mean, you know that me and you would be there day one to buy that.
Whoever owns the rights, sell it to Gold Ninja Video.
We'll put it out. So, as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter is from Ben, and it goes, Hello, Important Cinema Club. I want to thank you, not only for the podcast, but also for the amazing night I just had at my repertory theater. They played a double feature of Thrilling Bloody Sword and the Takashi Miike musical, The Happiness of Katakuris. That's a fun double bill. It was almost full and was an amazing night. My question is, how were we able to get Thrilling Bloody Sword into my rep theater? Well, I snuck in through the back door.
So, a little bit of context for people who are maybe listening to this podcast for the first time.
All the Tashlin heads who are like, someone did an episode on Frank Tashlin.
You never know. We've got listeners over the years because they searched a director's name and we were the only ones.
That's true.
So, Thrilling Bloody Sword is a Taiwanese martial arts extravaganza that Justin rescued from obscurity. He found the only available, perhaps the only surviving 35mm print.
So I found it and I scanned it, released it on Blu-ray, and much to my surprise, it has become a cult film that people really enjoy it. And I think it's the title and it's the visuals. It's like instant like that you want to see it based on that.
I mean, it's such a beautiful film, and all you have to do is show just a few scenes from it. It's crazy. It's wonderful.
So I posted a clip from it after I got the scan back, and I was like, wow, look at this. And from there, Joseph Ziemba, who also runs Bleeding Skull, reached out and said, hey, can I see Thrilling Bloody Sword? Maybe AGFA could rep it. And I said, yeah, sure, that's fine. And they watched it, they picked it up, and thanks to the head of programming who deals with theatrical distribution there, Brett, he has been pushing it on theaters, being like, you gotta play this movie. And it's been playing all over the place.
People love it.
I have not seen it theatrically yet with other people.
Although
it's coming up.
It's going to, because when is it showing in Toronto?
Let me check the date here. It's playing at the Fox Theater, which we listened to and made a joke about, like, I think they listen to this, and they do.
Okay, nice.
And I will be introducing it there and be selling some Gold Ninja Video stuff, perhaps even some Gold Ninja Video discs you can't buy on the website anymore.
Wow. All right, go meet Justin, folks. What day is it?
It will be on May 5th at 7 p.m. at the Fox Theater. I like how the Facebook page is Thrilling Bloody Sword with intro by Justin DeClue.
You're a star now,
so
Justin.
Those Important Cinema Club heads, they got to come out to see the screening. I even know that the person who rescued it from the dumpster many, many years ago, Colin Geddes, will be there as well.
Wow. So is there anything else in that letter? Was there a question? I can't remember.
Yes. He just asked me how I did it. And I said, well, I did it by AGFA reaching out and doing all the heavy lifting for me. Hopefully they'll be carrying some other Gold Ninja Video stuff, like maybe Skip Tracer, but that won't be through me. I said, do that through the director, because Gold Ninja Video for that one just does the Blu-ray release. And continuing on, he asks, anyways, my filmmaker suggestion is Jules Dassin. Will, listen to yourself. Your letterbox review of Night in the City turns out is one of the best movies ever. Thanks for your great podcast, Ben.
Oh, Jules Dassin.
Yeah.
Jules Dassin.
You know why I said Jules Dassin? Because I know that he went to France and he directed most of the movies there. But he's American who just went there because he was blacklisted.
I genuinely don't know how to pronounce his name, but that's right.
It's definitely English. It's not French.
Okay, well, he did direct Night in the City, which is a great noir.
That you saw on Nitrate.
I saw it on Nitrate Film. Oh, it's so good. But I never got a great sense of the rest of his filmography.
He has a lot of great movies, most of them that he did in France as well.
No, I would love to do that. God, Night in the City.
We haven't done like a noir director in so long.
We should.
Yeah. I think Anthony Mann maybe was the last one that we did.
I don't think we did Anthony Mann.
We haven't done Anthony Mann.
We should.
Yeah, we definitely should. Well, thank you very much for that letter. A lot to chew on there. And check your local listings of Thrilling Bloody Sword, because it's playing all over the place. I get updates of like, it's playing here, it's playing there. Get your theater to just book it. They can do it through AGFA and you'll get a DCP and watch it with a crowd. So our next letter is from Eric J. Now, I should say, when Will said last episode, he's like, send us your TV movie recommendations. I was like, oh my God, we're going to get so many emails. And we did.
Yeah, sorry. I should stop doing like calls for people to...
No, that's how you get, what is that? Not interaction. Engagement. That's what, the social people say. So that's fine.
Yeah.
You listen to the podcast where they're like...
I called for it because I'm not going to watch these movies.
Like, I always listen to podcasts. They're like, let us know in the comments what you think. It's like, the people doing the podcast don't care. But that's what I'm going to do on my YouTube videos from now on because I care.
Anyway, sorry. Thank you, everyone, for your suggestions. Actually, we did get some really good suggestions of, like, what is the TV movie canon?
I still don't feel I got, like, this is the TV movie auteur. Like, maybe Alan Clark. He did, like, Scum and stuff like that, and he worked mostly in the TV field. But I guess, like, if you get high enough, you forget they're TV directors because you're like, oh, they're just, feature film directors, right?
It's the Steven Spielberg dual syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But this letter is interesting because the letter writer goes, you guys asked for TV movie recommendations, and I just want to remind you that some of the great films of all time were originally produced for television. Decalogue, Berlin Alexanderplatz, Fanny and Alexander, Scenes from a Marriage, and Peter Watkins' Edvard Munch, one of my personal favorites. That's a letter writer. I have never seen that film. You don't have to delve into the interminable Is Twin Peaks a Movie? Letterbox debate to find some gems.
Okay. That's all fair. He's right when he says all that. I will just say that I wasn't talking about Scenes from a Marriage. I was talking about Return to Mayberry. Yes. I was talking about shit that is, like, undeniably a TV movie.
But the letter writer...
Maybe that's a self-defeating way to approach it.
Actually talks about this. He goes, do you guys have any insight on why some of the greatest European auteurs are producing work for television when a clearer divide between the two media seemed to exist in the American industry? Thanks again, Eric J. I will say that I'm not an expert on this, but the sense I get is there's a lot of government funds that go into television production, specifically in European countries.
Yeah, I think they go wherever the money is. It's like in the current context where there are a lot of directors who are directing for Netflix because that's where the money is.
Raul Ruiz basically made his bones doing TV projects, like going to country to wherever he could get funds to do whatever oddball thing that he could do, and it wasn't always based on, like, box office or ratings. I feel that, a lot of these auteurs, like, isn't it Man on a Wire was also a TV project, the Fassbender film?
Oh, World on a Wire.
World on a Wire, yeah. Not the classic,
I was confused about the documentary. Yeah.
Or The Walk, the classic Robert Zemeckis film, which is a remake of it. Oh, man, we didn't mention that Frank Tashlin directed a Three Stooges film. Oh, Snow White and the Three Stooges.
Okay, he got fired from that early on.
Oh, and Walter Lang came and directed it. Okay, that's why we didn't discuss it before people sent us any letters.
It's bad, by the way.
And it is interesting the way that a lot of auteurs ended up becoming TV guys in Europe. That never happens in America. If you are, a TV director, after you directed a bunch of feature films, it's because you need a steady income, and that's pretty much it. You probably have no artistic ambition. Every Canadian director, if they came up in the 90s, have become TV directors and are trapped in that hell, which I'm sure pays very well, but I cannot see it being that artistically fulfilling, because at a certain point, as someone else said, it's like directing traffic.
I once spoke to Bruce McDonald, And I said, do you have any advice for the young filmmakers? I was interviewing him for some hack thing.
Probably your university paper or
something like that. And he said, you've got to do your own shit. You've got to do your own shit. It can't just be paycheck gigs.
And he did. Like, if you look at Bruce McDonald's filmography, it'll be like, my babysitter's a vampire. And then it'll be like a very personal thing. And then he'll direct Orphan Black or something like that.
Probably.
Yeah.
They all direct Orphan Black. But yeah, and then
it's coming back.
Then he'll do some black and white movie starring Molly Parker. And
yep.
I respect his career. He's like one of the few guys who's been able to do it.
Yeah, it's very rare that other filmmakers in Canada are able to do that. And I think in Europe there was never that kind of distinction that TV was known as like, you shit, you failed, you're in television. Like Vittorio Catafavi, the famous auteur of the Important Cinema Club, he became a very well-renowned TV director of like weird projects after he stopped making feature films.
Well, hey, while we're talking about this, I highly recommend Edgar G. Ulmer's pilot, The Swiss Family Robinson.
Do you highly recommend it?
Yeah, it's great. It's beautiful. It's got many beautiful images.
Is it on YouTube? I know it was included on an all-day entertainment DVD at one point.
That's where I saw it. It might not be on YouTube. Oh, God. If you're a listener, you're probably so lost at this point. All these references to Vittorio Catafavi and Edgar G. Ulmer.
I hope people sit with like a pad of paper and they're like, what is that? Someone wrote a recent iTunes review which is like, I don't know what they're talking about, but I enjoy it. So we appreciate it.
It's like reading Ulysses.
But the way that you do it is like any comic book. You start at the beginning and you read all the way up to here.
That's right.
We should have a little voice that comes in. If you hit a button, it's like, see issue number such and such for more information about this director. So thank you again very much for your letter. If you have any questions or comment, you can send them at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. So on our Patreon this week, what are we talking about, Will?
Well, we haven't recorded it yet, but yeah, that Justin is making obscene sounds because
I'm just sucking.
Because we are talking about a vampire film, and Justin's now doing obscene gestures. We're talking about
a $50 video feed of us recording Important Cinema Club.
We're talking about look, it's called Dracula Sucks.
I like how you're trying to like qualify it. Wasn't it like one of the biggest productions in porn ever at the time of its release?
Yeah, it definitely was. There was some thought that they did two different versions of it. They did one that was hardcore called Dracula Sucks, one that was softcore called Love at First Bite or Lust at First Bite.
Not to be confused, because Love at First Bite is a classic Jim Carrey comedy, isn't it?
That's Once Bitten.
Damn it.
Love at First Bite is a George Hamilton Dracula
right.
comedy.
I'm getting my Dracula comedies confused.
So sorry, Dracula Sucks and Lust at First Bite is the softcore version. Anyway, Dracula Sucks was like kind of supposed to be a crossover midnight hit. It wasn't. But it stars Jamie Gillis as Dracula.
John Holmes is in it too, isn't he?
He's Renfield, and there's a whole galaxy of your favorite porn stars are in it. And it's new on a 4K. A new 4K Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray.
Do you live in Toronto and you don't own this yet? Go to Bay Street Video because I'm the only one who bought a copy up till now. Don't have them stop buying pornography in the store. That'd be terrible.
So we're going to talk about that, and I'm eager to watch it.
Me too. Have you ever seen it?
Years ago I saw it, don't remember a frame of it.
But now you're going to see it the way it was meant to be seen in glorious 4K.
I'm sure it's really good.
You're going to like throw a raincoat on and it'll be like you were sitting there when it came out.
That's right.
So if you want to listen to that episode, join at patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club and get our whole back catalog as well. What are we doing next week, Will?
Well, the month of comedy continues.
Yes, comedy months.
And we are exploring another country. First we were in Japan, then we were in the United States, and now we are going to the third country that produces comedies.
Oh, wait. Yep, there's only 3, right?
China, but more specifically Hong Kong. We are talking about Mr., and I can't believe we haven't talked about him yet. Oh my God.
Dedicated an episode to him yet.
How have we not done an episode on Wong Jing?
Wong Jing, the man who directed the best Jackie Chan film ever made, City Hunter, the one that Jackie Chan dismisses in his own autobiography.
Wong Jing is one of the most prolific, one of the most commercially successful
director. They're putting big air quotes there.
Certainly there are movies that he directed more than others.
He directed 9 films in like 1993, according to his IMDb.
But a hugely prolific director, has made so much money over the years, has made many, many popular films. He was the director of Stephen Chow in many of Stephen Chow's breakthrough films, has directed every Hong Kong star you can imagine, and he is a schlockmeister.
Oh, the schlockiest of schlockmeisters.
And he is someone who is proudly a schlockmeister. He's proudly a commercial filmmaker. He's a man who, in his interviews, really gives off the vibe of somebody with no taste. And Many of his films are horrible. Some of them are wonderful.
How are we going to decide which films to watch?
I'm leaving it up to you. I think you have a much better sense because there are so many facets of that filmography.
Well, he chased trends, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever was popular, he would go and make a movie in that style. A Better Tomorrow comes out? Well, guess what? Wang Jing makes Return to a Better Tomorrow.
And God of Gamblers.
I know, that's the one I would go to, God of Gamblers. I think that one's interesting to talk about because it doesn't get talked about that much now, but it was like a big, you know, if you're getting into Hong Kong films, you have to watch it. And Samuel Jackson even wanted to remake it. But it's like, Samuel, did you watch the movie? Because there's a huge part of that film that people forget about, which is the main plot.
He just saw the poster.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen God of Gamblers.
You've never seen God of Gamblers? Okay, so Chow Yun-fat gets hit on the head, and let's just say he goes full in the movie.
Right, so that's why I haven't seen it. It's because...
I thought you would have raced to see that.
No, it always just seemed like a movie that's like, yeah, it was popular, but it's probably not very good, and I'm probably not going to like it.
You will like it. It's very fun. And, I mean... like, do we talk Future Cops? Because you've seen that one, though. So
I have seen that.
I'm going to recommend some stuff. I'm going to go through the list. Maybe I need to reach out to Dylan Chung, the Hong Kong cinema expert.
Should we watch a bad one?
I mean, if we wanted to watch a bad one, we could just watch one that he just redid, Kung Fu Cult Master. He did it as a two-part. It's bad, though. It's bad. It's boring. It's like a mainland Chinese blockbuster.
We can already talk about the bad ones. Let's try to find some good ones. Let's make the case for Wang Jing.
And we're talking about Wang Jing, so that means everybody has to crack open their book of Planet Hong Kong, which has the best chapter about Wang Jing in it. It is so good. So that's what we're doing next week. Until then, my name's Justin Leclerc.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
Well, we sometimes take this space on the podcast to pay tribute to favorites of ours who have passed away, and since we recorded the last episode, we've lost two legends. First, Jimmy Wang Yu. My God. The guy who was the biggest Hong Kong martial arts star before Bruce Lee. And here's a little secret, guys. He's got a better filmography than Bruce Lee.
He does. Unquestionably better than Bruce Lee. Can we take a sidebar for a second and just talk about, like, Bruce Lee obsession? Because me and Will have become kind of, like, fascinated by this recently.
Well, because we each read a magazine called Eastern Heroes.
Which is a very famous magazine from the 90s that has a lot of articles and reviews.
And it's been revived, and it's good. There's a lot in it that's wonderful. If I have a piece of friendly criticism about it, it's...
No more Bruce Lee, please.
Yeah, like, everything about Bruce Lee has been explored. I don't need more.
Ad nauseum.
Well, because at this point, they're just like, there's an article in one of the recent issues that's like, exploring the history of forged Bruce Lee autographs. And
it's like, all right.
Sorry, this is so far removed from the thing I like.
Yeah, Bruce Lee. Like, you know what? I think we should put, we return him back to his grave, and we can never speak of Bruce Lee again for a while. Oh, let's raise Jimmy Wang Yu on a pedestal instead.
Okay, so Jimmy Wang Yu, he starred in a movie called The One-Armed Swordsman from 1970 or so. Don't have the exact year in front of me, but it was like the first Hong Kong martial arts blockbuster of that era.
Yeah,
it was
the Shaw Brothers era.
Yeah, that's right. And The One-Armed Swordsman's okay, but the ones that he did after that, like One-Armed Boxer, I think is amazing.
Well,
the Chinese
even
Boxer.
The one that, the Chinese Boxer, which he directed.
That's a fucking great movie.
And that's a great movie, and it's one of the first open-handed fight movies as well. That they weren't really doing that because they were doing wuxia pictures. When people recommend The One-Armed Swordsman, it's good, but you're like, it's a little bit slower because of the era it was made. Chang Cheh's directing it. He's finding his feet. You watch The Chinese Boxer, and it is like gritty. It is almost Sam Fuller-esque in the way it's edited and shot.
And just so much going on. Just a propulsive energy to it. It's the same in a movie like Beach of the War Gods, which he also made. I mean, Enter the Dragon's great, but The Man from Hong Kong is better.
Oh, The Man from Hong Kong is so good.
So as far as sort of like crossover East meets West Kung Fu movies go, I mean, this was an Australian Hong Kong co-production. George Lazenby's in it. It's got crazy stunts.
Even the director is getting in on the action, like doing crazy stunts and fighting Jimmy Wang Yu in the film.
The scene where George Lazenby has his like dinner jackets on fire.
And you can see it's him like pulling it off.
He actually got burned from it too. Just an amazing movie. And then Jimmy Wang Yu got into problems with his employers, the Shaw Brothers, and he skipped town because he wanted to break his contract, but he had some unbreakable contract. So he fled to Taiwan, and he could only make movies in Taiwan. So He then made movies in Taiwan, some of the craziest movies ever made, like Master of the Flying Guillotine.
Like Master of the Flying Guillotine, it was taking elements from a lot of different things that had been around. Like, the guillotine had been done as a Shaw Brothers movie, but Jimmy Wang Yu synthesized it in such a way that, like, Street Fighter 2, that's all ripped off from Master of the Flying Guillotine, like the fighters in that video game.
Now, I think the first time we ever heard of Jimmy Wang Yu, the first time many people hear about Jimmy Wang Yu is that he helped Jackie Chan get out of a dispute with the Triads. He helped save Jackie Chan's life, and as a result, Jackie Chan had to repay the favor by being in 2 of Jimmy Wang Yu's movies. One of them, Fantasy Mission Force, we've talked about many times.
Stone Cold classic.
We love it. One of my favorite movies ever, I'm going to say. I just love that movie. The other one, Island of Fire.
It's all right. I mean, a film that has Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, Andy Lau. Like, how can it fail?
A lot of people
owe favors to Jimmy Wang Yu.
A lot of people who were helped out of disputes with the Triads.
Jimmy Wang Yu, complicated history, and he's passed away now, so we can just enjoy his movies.
That's right. Please don't tell me what a bad guy he was.
We know.
Yeah.
We know
he was a bad guy. Great filmography. Now, moving on. Today, the day we're recording...
Not a bad guy we're talking about.
We found out, I mean, this is really awful, that Gilbert Gottfried died. Gilbert Gottfried, this is somebody who, of course he's been like around for my whole life. He's
his voice, right? You recognize it instantly. And we weren't kids that grew up, I think like a lot of people in America did on USA's Up All Night. We didn't get that channel.
No, I never saw it.
No.
I mean, I watched Aladdin growing up.
Yeah, love Iago.
But so it was his podcast that really...
Oh, what a podcast that is.
Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember listening to an episode and saying to Justin, like, you've got to listen to this. This is the real deal. And I remember you saying,
wasn't it
or was it the other way around?
I think I told you it was the real deal.
One of us said, and the other one was like the screechy voice guy.
Yeah, I think it was you, because I listened to it, and was it Leonard Maltin or someone like that? It was like maybe Drew Friedman was on, and I was like, you gotta listen to this, Will.
Well, Gilbert Gottfried is a monster kid. He loved the was a monster kid. He loved the Universal horror movies growing up.
He also loved Cesar Romero.
And he would just have all these old timers, people like Adam West, Roger Corman, Dick Van Dyke, I don't know, all those, any octogenarian or nonagenarian star. He had the little girl from Ghost of Frankenstein on the podcast. And people like Rick Baker, Drew Friedman. There was a great episode last year where he had the historian David J. Scull and Rick Baker, the Oscar-winning makeup artist, and they talked about Frankenstein, the 1931 Frankenstein, the 90th anniversary. They just go on for 2 hours about it, sharing all sorts of amazing behind-the-scenes tidbits, talking about their own relationship with the movie. It's heaven. It's why the podcast medium was invented.
I mean, Gilbert and his, the one who does all the work on the show, Frank Santapadre, what they get out of their hosts and their interests, which no one else is talking about, the guests they could get, it is just amazing, and it is genuinely crushing to see he passed away, because I just listened to an episode a couple days ago that he put out.
I know he had a long-term illness apparently, but he was still, he just had an episode a couple days ago, and I'm selfishly very sad that the podcast is over now, that we're not going to get any more of it.
Me too. But if you want to know more about Gilbert Gottfried, there's actually a really good documentary about him. I think it's just called Gilbert.
That's
so
right.
I would highly recommend checking that out, because it is a delight, especially to see how much of a calm and normal guy that he was. I mean, I never even listened to him. He was big on Howard Stern as well. Like, that was one of his main gigs.
I've been seeing those clips going around today.
And I'm like, I don't know them. It's all about the podcast for me and Iago.
Did you ever see him on Norm Macdonald's podcast?
No.
On that famous... Oh, man. Treat yourself and look up Gilbert Gottfried on Norm Macdonald Live. It's a 2-part episode, and it's one of the funniest things ever.
Well, I mean, this is very sad, but if people haven't checked this stuff out, you got to go and do it now.